Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jules Monroe, and the story this week was not written by me. The story this week is Wolf Who Saves Valentine's Day, and it was written by my late best friend and co-author Chloe Zane. Usually I reread these stories to get an idea of the tropes, but not this one. All I know about this one is that it includes a wolf who puts his foot in his mouth, and then it has to clean up his mess. It's cute, light, and fun, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
The Wolf WHO Saved Valentines. The Wolf WHO Saved Series Book 2. Chloe Zane. Chapter 1. The moment Baxter entered the store, he felt as if his soul bled out of his ears. He could, for a moment, breathe a sigh of relief that the parade of Christmas decorations was over. Holidays, especially at the end of the year, had that tendency to linger far beyond any useful lifetime. This was especially true, as the previously exorbitantly expensive decorations and gift ideas went on sale. That wasn't what Christmas was about. At least, it wasn't what Baxter came to believe Christmas was about. So what was this travesty then? Ricky held up the oversized teddy bear. And by oversized, it wasn't by just a small amount. It was half as tall as Ricky. "Feel it, Baxter," he said, shoving the nightmarish stuffed animal at him. "Touch his fur." Baxter took a step back, then a step to the side to go around Ricky. The younger wolf let out a disappointed sound, and the teddy bear itself appeared to deflate at the lack of attention. He sighed when Ricky's pouted. "What do you possibly need a giant teddy bear for?" "For my special Valentine," he said, filled with confidence as he held the bear up again. "And what makes this bear any different than the dozens of stuffed bears created all over the world?" "It has a red bow?" Ricky said, not quite so confident that time. "Jesus, Bax," Clint said, taking the bear from Ricky. He turned it around to face Baxter, lift its arm to wave high. "It has a heart stitched on its paws." Ricky lifted a foot to show Baxter. This display was supposed to serve some purpose? "And what the hell am I going to do with a giant stuffed bear?" "Be my Valentine?" Clint said, reading a paw. "It's a Valentine bear." "You two keep saying that like it's supposed to have some significance." Ricky trotted ahead of Baxter and posed in front of the 3 aisles of stuffed animals, all in various shades of Valentine's Day promotion plastered over them. Then there was the candy. Shelves of blood-red hearts encased in crinkly cellophane with hideously cheap red velvet bows stuck on the top. Next to those were the obscenely large cards with trite, cliché declarations of affection. Baxter rolled his eyes. "I get it. It's a major event in February, where people spend money they don't have to declare feelings that they may not feel for someone just to get laid." Clint whistled. "Harsh man. You have something against Valentine's Day?" "No," Baxter said. "Yes," Ricky countered. He glared at Ricky. Ricky returned his glare. Baxter was intimidating, and he knew he was an imposing and intimidating figure. Ricky was more like a terrier, hyped up on sugar, who caved when faced with a stronger foe. On this, Ricky didn't back down. Baxter pinched at the bridge of his nose. "We came in to get Aunt Hild's ingredients," he said, waving her neatly printed and very specific list. "Can we please get on with this? She'd like us to get back to the house before morning." "But it's afternoon," Ricky said, putting the bear away. He jogged to catch up, as Baxter strode with grim determination to push the gaudy reminder of a holiday he didn't understand behind him. Clint chuckled behind him. "He wants to get back in time to see Logan Price come home from work. Must be something about those dress slacks and that tie he likes." Baxter stopped suddenly and whirled around. Clint had been distracted and wasn't able to stop in time. He collided with the immovable wall of Baxter Logan. "Tell me again why you two came along." "I'm perfectly capable of getting these things on my own," Baxter growled. "Apparently not. The last time Hild asked for evaporated milk, you took home dry," Clint said reasonably as he took a step back. "It took her months to use it all up." "Does it matter?" "What is the difference?" Baxter asked. Heathen. Of course it matters. One is in a can, the other is a powder. Clint looked at him, as if it should have been obvious. Baxter snorted. I didn't hear any of you pups complain. You like her cooking? We do, but we also had to hear her complain about using the wrong milk, as she called it. Clint snatched the list out of Baxter's hand. And then the game of keep away started, as Clint danced around just out of reach so he could get a look at the list. In the end, Baxter had the longer reach and successfully took it back. Now it was wrinkled. He frowned as he had to smooth it out. If you guys insist on helping. Baxter folded the list into thirds and neatly tore the sections apart, handing one to each of them. We can get out of here faster if we split up. Sweet, Ricky said, holding his up as if it were a prize. I get the frozen section. Rocky Road ice cream, here I come. Rocky Road's not on. It was useless for Baxter to even finish the sentence. Ricky had practically teleported across the store. Clint slapped Baxter on the shoulder. You should have looked at the section closer and sent him to the he paused in thought. There's no way we're getting out of here without Rocky Road, regardless of the section he ended up with. Baxter snorted in agreement. Although, he wasn't going to dissuade Ricky in the least. Logan also liked Rocky Road. And Baxter would pay for the Rocky Road himself if he had to, so Aunt Hild had some in the freezer for Logan when he came over. At least Ricky was occupied by something other than this Valentine's Day nonsense. Then Clint trotted off to get his portion of the list, leaving Baxter in peace and quiet. Along the central aisle running down the center of the store had a row of tables set up to showcase several items and services. Baxter didn't get 2 tables in before someone accosted him. Hi. The young man popped up right in his path. He had a clipboard and a pen. It made him look very officious. Judging by the signage on the table, it was for some internet cable television outfit. Do you have a few minutes? No, Baxter said. He cut left to get around the overly cheerful representative, dressed in his cheerful blue shirt with Rod's name emblazoned across the left pocket. If we could just ask what internet provider you use. Baxter stopped and took a deep breath before he whirled on the guy. Do I look like the kind of guy who would use the internet? The guy shrunk back, holding his clipboard between them as a shield. You might, he squeaked out. I can tell you now I'm not. I don't even own a TV. Well, do you know anyone who does? I think 98% of Miltonville owns a TV. So ask them. Okay, the man said in a meek voice. Thank you. The moment Baxter turned, he walked right into a cloud of perfume. It made his eyes sting. Too late to back out, though. The cool alcohol-based mist of fragrance wafted and stuck on his skin. Now he smelled like alcohol and artificial flowers. He sneezed. It's the newest fragrance by DL de Journea. I'm sure the lady in your life would love it for this special holiday. It's in a unique bottle created just for Valentine's Day, and your special girl. Baxter blinked and stumbled back, batting his hand around in the air. I don't have one, he groused. Surely you have a mother, a sister, sister-in-law? A neighbor? A good-looking guy like you, I'm sure has half a dozen dates lined up for the 14th. No, he said more firmly. He lurched forward, hoping to put more distance between them. Almost immediately, he collided with yet another one of the goods hawkers. The tray tipped precariously, and Baxter held a hand out to steady it in an attempt to help the guy get it back under control. Sorry about that, Baxter mumbled. Then the aroma of sausage hit his nose, and his stomach grumbled. Oh, the man said, waving a hand around and making a face. You didn't escape the gauntlet. That woman was a nuisance, he groused. It took 2 hours to convince my wife I wasn't seeing another woman behind her back. Sample, the older man said, holding the tray out. Each of the small sausage pieces had a broken pretzel stick poking out of it. If you have someone special who likes to eat, I think these will go a lot further than fragrance or HGN. Now this was a Valentine's Day gift Baxter could get behind. He took a sample and popped it into his mouth. "This is good," he said as he chewed. The sausage had just spicy enough to give it a kick, but it wasn't eye-watering. The older man nodded. "And I think this would go really well with that coarse ground pub mustard. A great appetizer or even a full meal. Or a small cube of sharp cheddar. Throw in a 6-pack of beer and it's a perfect night," Baxter agreed. There was a lot Baxter could do with sausage. Well, mostly just eat it. That worked for him. In the deep freezer next to the table, Baxter glanced in, then pulled 2 packages out. He held them up. "Thanks. Have a great day." "You too." Baxter strolled off with his prize. This was what a holiday was supposed to be about. Chapter 2. Good heavens, what happened? Aunt Hild flapped her towel in the air the moment Baxter strolled in. Clint ducked by everyone and lunged for the back door to open it so the air could circulate. "Perfume lady caught Baxter," Ricky said. He didn't bother to hide his laugh. Clint scowled at him. "It's not funny. That smell is going to linger in my car for a week. I'll have to ride with the windows down until it wears off." "If it wears off," Ricky added gleefully. "You're not helping," Baxter said. Baxter set the bags on Aunt Hild's counter and started to unpack the items. "It's not my fault," he said gruffly. "She ambushed me." "Just wash your clothes in vinegar instead of soap," Aunt Hild said. She looked at the half-gallon of Rocky Road ice cream and lifted her eyebrow at Baxter in question. He motioned with his head to the youngest of the wolf pack, who was busy organizing his boxes of chocolates. She chuckled softly and put it in the freezer. The aroma should come out with no issue. "We got everything on your list, Aunt Hild," Clint said. He watched as Ricky sorted his boxes next. "And then some. You didn't make her pay for that, did you?" "No," Ricky said. He pulled out a receipt and handed it to Baxter, who eyed it suspiciously. "What do I want with that?" Baxter asked. "Reimbursement. I bought the chocolates for the shop. To leave out for the customers. We don't get that many customers." "We might. It's Valentine's Day. Maybe some housewives want to bring in their husband's lawn tools to get them fixed as a present." Baxter shook his head. "I have no idea where to file that in the cabinet of this makes no sense." "File it under Ricky. That makes plenty of sense on its own," Clint said. He pulled out a cookie sheet and started waving it in Baxter's direction. "Dude, take your shirt off or something. You're giving me a headache." "So what are you making, Auntie?" Ricky asked. He held up the can of cocoa powder. "A red velvet cake for Harvey for Valentine's Day. It's a recipe passed down from my mother. It uses the chemistry of the ingredients to make it red. No relying on red food dye." "I say it's lost on the likes of Harvey," Clint said with a grin to her as she walked around behind him to put the buttermilk in the refrigerator. "You should let us eat it. You boys are getting a chocolate cake with chocolate buttercream frosting." "Chocolate overload," Baxter said. "Why a cake?" "For Harvey, I mean. Shouldn't he be doing something for you?" Aunt Hild shrugged. "It's a special day, and I want to do something special for him." "You're not fooling us," Clint said. "You like him." "Don't be foolish. Of course I like him. He's a decent, kind man, and he keeps the community house grounds looking wonderful. It's a nice way to say thank you. By making a cake from the vaults of the family recipe book." Clint winked at her. "I got you." She bapped him with the hand towel. "It must be serious," Baxter said. Clint was right. The lingering perfume was giving him a headache. He stripped off his shirt and dropped it outside the kitchen door. "Usually, we get the box cake." "Lying is unattractive in any man," Aunt Hild said primly. "You have spare shirts in the laundry room. I'm not going to have you wandering around with your naked chest hanging out." Baxter laughed. Not sure what I said was a lie. He went to the laundry room to dig out a shirt. No one in Baxter's pack dared defy their Aunt Hild. Although Aunt was more metaphorical than literal. She was their foster mother. Everyone in Baxter's pack spent the hardest parts of their lives growing up in her care. She selflessly took in lichen-infected children who had no other homes. The lichen virus had long been under control, but society still had no desire to deal with the devastation still being wrought. Aunt Hild's kindness and generosity won her the hearts and devotion of dozens of lichen-infected boys and girls through the years. For Baxter in particular, he took that particularly seriously. Especially after she decided to retire. She had no children of her own, and the rest of her family were scattered to the four corners of the world. He had gathered up the few werewolves who held affection towards her, combined their money to buy her a house in a small subdivision. He then opened a shop to employ those who, like him, wanted to stay close to her. Clint peered over Aunt Hild's shoulder to look at her recipe. It's an awful lot of stuff to go into a cake. They have box mix for it, right? Blasphemer. One does not simply make a cake for a special occasion, out of a box. Besides, I know my red velvet cake is far superior to Anne Luthrow's cakes, she said with a prim sniff. There it is, Clint said with a knowing nod. That's why Harvey gets a cake from scratch. Aunt Hild huffed out and snatched the confectionery sugar out of his hand. What do you boys have planned for February 14th? Jared is heading to Las Vegas, Ricky said. And Xander is having a cookout for the pack. I'm headed to Pensacola to celebrate with the kids at the hospital. I already have over 100 Valentine's cards collected and written out, Clint said. You should settle down and have children of your own, Aunt Hild said with an affectionate kiss to his cheek. Maybe one day, Auntie. What about you, honey? Aunt Hild asked Baxter. Have anything special planned with Logan? No. Not buying into this foolishness. I think Logan already knows I fancy him. I don't need to make a grand proclamation about it, Baxter said gruffly. She pursed her lips. I see. The way she said it spoke volumes of her disapproval. What? Nothing. Clint and Aunt Hild exchanged glances. Clint lifted a shoulder in a shrug. What? Baxter asked again. Well, it just seems a shame that you'd be so selfish. I thought I raised you better than that, she explained. Selfish? How is it selfish to not buy into a holiday that the suits on Madison Avenue have people convinced I must tell my loved ones I love them on that day? So you do love him? Ricky asked. Stay out of this, Baxter barked. I'm saying that if I truly care about someone, why would I wait for one day out of 364 to tell them? Why wouldn't I just tell them on any day? On every day? No reason. It's just a nice gesture, that's all. Aunt Hild patted his arm to soothe him. I'm sure Logan won't be too hurt. Baxter threw his hands up and stalked out of the kitchen to find a fresh t-shirt. It was good that Baxter changed out of his good shirt. Being covered in perfume saved it. Hild's chore for the day was repainting her spare bedroom. On any given day, her unexpected tasks led to Baxter leaving chores clothes over at her house, just for those spontaneous messy jobs. Between the three of them, Baxter, Clint, and Ricky had the room painted in record time. In fact, the timing was perfect. It was time for Logan to get home. Baxter collected the rollers and brushes and volunteered to rinse them off just so he could be outside when Logan pulled in. He wasn't disappointed. At 5:15 on the nose, Logan pulled his Suburban into the drive and parked in front of his garage. That was something Baxter never understood. If you have a garage, use it. Logan insisted that's where he kept his stuff. Baxter didn't understand stuff. He never had stuff when he was growing up. It was a habit, or lack of habit, that he didn't have stuff now. Everything he owned, he had a use and a reason. Otherwise, there was no room to store it. It was cute that Logan had stuff, though. Baxter would probably like Logan's stuff. Logan waved as he strolled around his SUV. Hey, Baxter. I guess that means Hild finally settled on a color for her guest room, he said. Baxter wiped his forehead with his arm. He could feel the splatters of paint that had hardened on his face. Yeah. I am not sure I understand the difference between eggshell white and ivory white. It's just paint. He clucked his tongue. You've lived with her this long, and you still haven't figured out that when a lady sets her mind on something, the devil is in the details. I try not to think too hard on it. Logan shifted his briefcase and jacket to one hand to pull his phone. Good plan. So what do you have planned for tonight? Nothing that I can't get out of. Did you have something in mind? And Baxter would ignore that cute little tickle in his gut that Logan would even ask him. He turned the water off and swung the rollers down hard to shake the excess water off. He was careful not to do it in Logan's direction. Hild wants to go to bingo tonight. I was hoping you'd come with us. Okay, so maybe that would be one of the few things Baxter would try to get out of. Except it was Logan. But it was bingo. And Logan would be there. But it was bingo. He glanced up to see Logan watching him intently, with a serious expression on his face. Baxter plastered on a smile. I'd love to go, he finally said. It surprised him how he managed to sound excited about it. Logan pursed his lips. You're not exactly enthusiastic about it. Can I sweeten the pot and offer a trip to Chastain's for an ice cream shake? With a gesture of his clean brush, Baxter nodded. Now you're talking. I'll even let you buy. Logan laughed softly. It was such a great laugh. It starts at 7. Don't be late. Chapter 3. Twin Pines wasn't officially a retirement community. Many families, spanning generations, lived in the subdivision. It had its fair share of retired people. And they loved their bingo. Bingo night was one of Hild's favorite nights. Perhaps it was the community aspect. She was friends with her neighbors, and they looked after each other. Baxter appreciated that they kept an eye on her, while Baxter and the pack were at work. There was no denying it, though. She loved bingo night. Apparently, so did the rest of the community. The hall was packed wall to wall with people of all ages. The tables on the main floor were placed end to end, shaped in a squared-off U to allow seating on both sides. At one end of the hall, a table holding the bingo ball cage and the spare box to hold the called numbers was set up on the small raised platform. A table in the corner held bingo books, daubers, and glue, along with refreshments for sale. Baxter followed Hild and Logan to a table. Mr. and Mrs. Howell shifted down a seat to allow Baxter to sit on the opposite side from his aunt and Logan. How are you, son? Mr. Howell said. Doing good, sir. How are you? Read the obits this morning, didn't see my name. Figured my day could only go up from there. He tipped his beer at Baxter. Beer? They sold beer here. Maybe this night wouldn't be so bad. Do you want me to take that, Hild? Logan asked, motioning to the cake carrier in her hand. I've got it, thank you, Logan. If you'll get us 3 books and fish out my extra dauber and glue for Baxter, I'm going to drop this off in the kitchen. Baxter looked at the people milling around the bingo collar table. He leaned over to get Logan's attention. Which one is Harvey? You've never met Harvey? Logan pulled out their daubers and glue sticks. I just come here to see Aunt Hild, Baxter said. And you? Logan gave him a sunny smile. I'm glad to hear that. I like seeing you too, Baxter. And I don't see Harvey at the moment. But he's the bingo collar. He thrust 2 thick tubes at Baxter. What are these? Logan adjusted his glasses in that adorable way that mesmerized Baxter every time. One is the dauber. You touch it over whatever matching number is called. The other is a glue stick. That's to stick your bingo cards together. Why would I do that? He pointed to a young family who had stuck their cards together. It makes it easier to handle more than one card at a time. Looks like paper to me. Well, they are, After a game, they're no longer valid. Paper is easier to dispose of and less wasteful. Where do we get them? I'm working on that. Save our chairs. I'll be right back. Baxter sat down after Logan left, staring at the things in his hand. Instruments of danger. The trouble Baxter could have gotten up as a kid if he had had them. I know that look, Aunt Hild said as she sat down. You're up to no good. Baxter held up his dauber and glue stick. There was a lot I could do with these when I was a kid. I know. There was a reason you never went with me to bingo night. Hild opened her bag and pulled out half a dozen daubers and glue sticks. She lined them up neatly to the side. That's hardcore. Baxter nodded to her assortment. The jackpots are worth it. Wait, are you telling me you play bingo for money? Why else would anyone play bingo? Aunt Hild asked with a surprised look. It's fun? Yes, but the money's nice too. Baxter rolled his eyes. Of course my Aunt Hild's a gambler. She smiled serenely at him. So did you deliver your cake? No, she said with a small pout. Harvey's not here yet. But I left it in the kitchen with a small card for him. He'll see it when he takes a break. Here we go, Hild. Logan set a handful of bingo papers in front of her, split off some for himself, and handed a few across the table to Baxter. Why don't I get as many as you and Aunt Hild? They looked at each other and started laughing. You have to crawl before you can walk, Baxter, Logan said. The game moves pretty fast. It takes a pro to keep up with the numbers and cards. Hild can have 12 in play at a time. Tonight is a light night, I feel. Just 9, she said. They both watched as Hild used the glue stick to tack the individual cards into a giant 3x3 grid. Logan stuck his together in a 3x2 grid. He smiled at Baxter. I'm still getting used to it. What if I want to do that? Baxter asked with a frown. Let him keep up with 2, Logan, Hild said. If he thinks he can handle that. Baxter took 2 cards and glued them together, side by side. Oh, he's so got this. B13, Harvey called out. Baxter searched his cards. The one on the left didn't have one. So he scanned down. G50. Wait. Baxter said with a frown. I haven't finished looking for B13. He saw neither card had B13 and started to search for G50. O68. What? Tell him to slow down. Logan laughed softly across the table from him. I can't remember what was before 06. I-17. Baxter threw his hands up. He's going too fast. Look at the light board on the wall behind him, Hild said. It's all the numbers he's. I-21. Baxter made a strangled noise in the back of his throat. Logan stifled a giggle. Don't laugh at me. This is hard to keep up with. He's talking like he's on fire or something. Logan rose to a knee and leaned across the table. N35. You look for that one, he said. With his dauber, Logan found the other numbers that had been called, while Baxter struggled to keep up with the new ones being called out. Once Logan was done, Baxter noted that he didn't have a bingo even with all those numbers. That was disappointing. He thought for sure he'd have won by now. It took another few passes of numbers before he felt comfortable that he was actually keeping up. With his eyebrows furrowed, he concentrated as he searched his 2 cards for the numbers being called out. Only a few more minutes passed before someone on the other row of tables threw their hand in the air. Bingo, they shouted. Groans of disappointment filled the hall as the bingo shouter trotted up to the table. Give me a few minutes to verify her card, folks, Harvey said. Aunt Hild leaned back, eyeing her set of 9 critically. I almost had bingo on 2 cards. Who won? Logan twisted around. Rebecca Steinman's daughter. It's a bingo, Harvey said. Everyone cheer for Becca and her $167.14 win. Even though the room had expressed disappointment not moments before, They cheered when the teenager held up her winnings and raced back to her family. "That's some serious cash for a 10-minute game," Baxter said. "Next game is a blackout," Harvey announced. "Game starting in 10 minutes. People stood up, some stretching, some getting new cards, others going into the kitchen to get snacks and drinks. Baxter stood up. "I'm going to get a beer. Anyone want anything?" Logan shook his head. "I'm fine." "I'll come with you, sweetie," Aunt Hild said. "I want to make sure Harvey gets his cake." He followed Aunt Hild into the kitchen. Near the refrigerator, Harvey was eating on a slice of Aunt Hild's red velvet cake. "Oh good, he found it." She giggled and turned away. "Is he enjoying it?" "You were just looking at him." "I know, but I don't want to stare. It's rude." Baxter sighed. He watched as Harvey conversed with another elderly lady. They laughed together and talked animatedly. "He seems to." She giggled. "How do I look? Do I have any ink on my face?" "No, Aunt Hild, you look fine." "Okay. I'm going over." She took 2 steps before she whirled around to face Baxter. Her expression had shifted from pleased to horrified. "What is she talking to him about?" I don't know." Baxter was across the room from Harvey. "I'm standing here with you." "Go over and find out," she said testily. She gave Baxter a good push in emphasis that she wasn't going to let him say no. He stumbled forward. Glaring at her, she shooed him on, pointing and nodding. There was no getting out of it. He went by the bucket that held the beer, pulling out a couple of dollars and dropping it in the jar before grabbing a bottle. Sauntering up to Harvey, he smiled at the bingo caller and the lady standing there. "Hey," he said, holding his hand out. "You're Harvey, right?" Harvey shifted his cake plate to his opposite hand, wiped his palm along his trouser leg before shaking. "I am. Harvey Batterman. Baxter Lawson. I'm Hild Brentworth's foster son." "Right," Harvey said, recognition clear in his expression. "She talks about you a lot. All nice, I hope." "She's very proud of you. All of the young men that she raised over the years." Harvey stepped back and gestured to the woman standing with them. "Have you met Anne Luthrow?" Ooh. This was Anne Luthrow. Baxter had only heard bits and pieces about her, but it was clear from Aunt Hild's reaction she wasn't a fan of Miss Luthrow. Baxter held out his hand. "Miss Luthrow." She said nothing, giving Baxter a stiff smile. Baxter. Have you had any of this?" Harvey waved his fork over the red velvet cake slice. "You really need to before it disappears. And Luthrow really knocked it out of the park this time." "Wait, what was that?" Baxter's brow furrowed. "I haven't." He glanced around, spying Aunt Hild's cake carrier on the counter. The cake was a third gone. She would be pleased to know that people were enjoying it, but it was her cake. And there didn't appear to be another cake like it among the other potluck items sitting out. "Yes," Anne Luthrow said, her smile widening as she hooked an arm with Harvey. "I knew I had to do something special for our favorite bingo caller." Behind Baxter, he heard his Aunt Hild gasp. He didn't need to look over to know she was about to blow like a volcano. "Oh, that's good. It looks delicious. I guess I better get over there and get a piece before it's gone," Baxter said cautiously. "Do that. But you can always ask Anne Luthrow to make one for you. She's really at the top of her game now." She smiled affectionately at Harvey before turning to look at Hild. Her grin shifted from adoration to one that declared victory. "Oh boy."
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the story so far. If you are, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Thanks.
Chapter 4. As surreptitiously as he could, Baxter searched the kitchen and gathered snacky things to take back to the table, including a small wedge of Aunt Hild's cake. It was definitely her cake carrier. She'd had it for decades. It was older than Baxter was. She said she left it with a card, but there was no sign of it anywhere. If Harvey thought Anne made it, that meant the card was missing. It had to be somewhere in the community center. Casually, Baxter took a turn by the large garbage can set up in the corner to collect the trash for the evening. He couldn't see anything sitting near the surface that looked like a card. But that didn't mean it wasn't there. He snagged some cookies and chips and circled around to find that Aunt Hild was not where he left her. She was back out at the table, talking with Logan. He glanced towards the kitchen and his gaze met mine. He rubbed her back affectionately before he stood from the table and met me just outside the community kitchen. "Baxter, do you know what's going on?" He motioned over his shoulder. "That Anne Luthrow person has taken credit for Aunt Hild's red velvet cake. Harvey doesn't know if it's from her." "She what?" "That viperess." Logan held his hands out and took a deep breath. Okay. What can we do?" Baxter munched on a chip. "I don't think there's anything we can do. Aunt Hild brought the cake carrier in with a card, and that card is missing." "Did you look in the trash?" "I did. I mean, I didn't dig around in it or anything, but if it's there, it's under a mountain of paper plates, half-filled cups, and wasted food. Do you know how much food we waste a year in this country? This is getting out of hand." "I know," Baxter said with a snort. "If people would just take enough food that they'll eat and not throw excess out." Logan glanced up with a surprised expression. "What are you talking about?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about how upset Aunt Hild is. Did she overhear Harvey carrying on over Anne and giving her credit for the cake?" "I know she overheard something," he said. "Was he really doing that?" Baxter nodded. "We have to do something." Logan leaned against the wall next to where Baxter stood. "You have to do something." Baxter choked on a chip. "Me? What am I expected to do? And while we're talking about that, why am I expected to do anything? She's practically your mother. Hild raised you and all the others. You owe her something to defend." Logan fell silent when Anne Luthrow followed Harvey out of the kitchen as he headed for the bingo numbers cage again. "Defend her honor?" Baxter finished for Logan once Anne and Harvey were out of sight. "Yes," Logan said. "How do I go about that?" "I don't know. Think of something." Logan ducked into the kitchen and reappeared moments later with 2 water bottles as he headed back to his seat next to Aunt Hild. Baxter finished his chips and drained the nasty coffee. They really needed to clean their coffee makers. It was far too bitter. He went back into the kitchen and looked around. A few ladies were tidying up. The garbage can was fuller than a few minutes ago. Going through the garbage was not the highlight of his life. Ralph, the center's sole housecleaning staff, appeared with a fresh can liner. "Evening, Baxter," he said cheerfully. Baxter studied Ralph as he helped himself to some of the food. His eyes were clear, and his nose wasn't a cheery red. Perhaps he had taken Baxter's and Logan's advice to give up drinking. Or at the very least, stop drinking at work. "Hey, Ralph. Got a question for you, buddy." Baxter walked with Ralph to the garbage can. He helped Ralph pull the old bag out and replace it with a fresh one. "Sure, Baxter. Anything at all, I'll be glad to answer. How many bags have you changed out?" When it appeared Ralph didn't understand, Baxter tried again. "Have you already changed out bags this evening?" "Oh yes," Ralph said enthusiastically. "Is this the second one?" "Yes. I already threw the other into the dumpster." Baxter sighed heavily. "Damn the luck. Okay." He slung an arm around Ralph's shoulder and walked with him out of the kitchen area. They walked down the long hallway to the side door that would lead to the outside area and the dumpster. "There's a 50 with your name on it if you could search both of those bags. I'm looking for a card from Aunt Hild. We think it may have been thrown away." He wrinkled his nose. "Dig through the garbage? That's kind of nasty. It meant a lot to her. I'm sure she'd consider this a personal favor." Ralph thought about it before he nodded. If it's important to Miss Hild that I dig through the garbage, then I'll do it. That wasn't exactly how Baxter meant for that to parse out, but he'd take it. He dug out 2 20s and a 10, and handed it off. I appreciate it, Ralph. I'll check in with you later. Baxter felt a little bad about pawning that job off on Ralph. But at least he didn't have to do it. Baxter left Ralph to do the garbage digging, and headed back into the community center. He passed an open room. The lights were off, but the door stood wide open. He ducked in just to see what was there. There was nothing more than 2 tables, sitting perpendicular to each other, and a scattering of a few folding metal chairs. Sitting on the corner of a table, there was a thick book. Curious, Baxter ducked to get a look at it. The book was almost 3 inches thick. The cover was made of a thick board and covered by gingham cloth. It was a handmade book of some kind. In the low light it looked like recipes. Baxter took it with him when he closed the room door. Whoever lost the book would probably be looking for it. He could leave it in the kitchen, and the owner would easily find it there. Once he was back in strong light, he glanced at the charming book again. In the proper light, the book wasn't as cute as he thought. Not with the name emblazoned across the front anyway. Anne Luthrow. He made a U-turn out of the kitchen and headed back to the room where he'd found the book, ducking inside again. He shut the door and flicked on the lights so he could get a better look. What Baxter held in his hands was pure gold. He was holding Anne Luthrow's recipe book. Did he dare open it? Of course he dared. Baxter flipped it open and thumbed through the pages. He didn't notice anything special or spectacular about the different recipes. Standard stuff. Pies, cakes, muffins, breads, casseroles. All the usual elderly lady fare for potlucks and luncheons. He paused on one page and blinked. Down at the bottom on the right-hand side of the page was a string of letters. He turned to another random page. In fact, the closer he looked, the more he could easily spot the string of numbers and letters on every page down in the right-hand corner. To be fair, some were in the upper left. Baxter closed the book firmly. So what did this mean? He had a clue. But he wanted someone with a good head for business and cutting through bullshit to look at it. Logan needed to see this. Baxter didn't want Aunt Hild to know he had Anne Luthrow's recipe book just yet. First, he'd get Logan's take on it before he revealed anything to his aunt. He tucked it under his shirt and folded his hands across his stomach. Damn it, he needed a jacket. He remembered Logan pulling his off and draping it on the back of his chair. Baxter sent a brief text to Logan. Come to back. Bring or jacket. Everything okay? Fine. Need jacket. Okay after this game. Too late. Now. Less than a minute later, Logan appeared from the kitchen. He stepped into the hall and looked in both directions before spying Baxter standing at the door to the empty room. He flagged Logan down and beckoned for him to follow. Baxter, what is all this about? I'm losing time on my cards. I know. Sorry. Need your jacket. I need to smuggle something out of here, and I don't have a way. Logan handed over his jacket, eyeing Baxter suspiciously. Baxter, he said in a low warning voice. What are you doing? It may be important. He was still holding it out. Logan looked like he was afraid it would bite him. With a sigh, he relented and handed Baxter his jacket. If someone yells about this, I'm sending them your way. Baxter wrapped the book up in Logan's jacket. I'll take the heat. But only after it's out of the building. Can you carry this? Baxter thrust the jacket and book at him. Logan didn't take the jacket or the book. In fact, he just gave Baxter a look. Baxter waved it at him. Just get it out of the building. We'll drop it by your place when we head back. With a sigh, Logan took the book and made sure his jacket hid it sufficiently. That will probably be soon. I think Hild's lost her appetite for bingo tonight. She's alternating between sad faces at Harvey and murder faces at Anne Luthrow. Then after this game, let's head home. Baxter tapped on the jacket. I think this is important to take a closer look. Am I going to regret this? I'm pretty sure I'm going to regret this. Chapter 5. Hild was quiet the entire walk back to her house. Logan was unsuccessful in drawing her into any conversation. She simply walked along, either lost in pity or lost in thought. If it was self-pity, well, that wasn't Aunt Hild's style. Baxter thought she deserved a little pity party anyway. If it was thought, there was no telling what was going through her mind until she chose to talk about it. I'm going to drop this off at my place on the way, Logan said, motioning to his jacket. I'll catch up with you two in a minute. Sure, Baxter said. He draped his arm lightly over Aunt Hild's shoulder once they were on the porch. She dug out her keys. Baxter took her keys to unlock the door and entered first so he could turn on a light. Can I get you something, Aunt Hild? Put on the kettle for tea or something? Not that he had any concept of making good tea. She used the loose-leaf stuff. He was used to the tea bags. From what Logan said, that automatically disqualified him from any tea-drinking associations. No, thank you, honey. I think I'll put on my nightgown and curl up in bed with a book. I'm not feeling very well. She cupped Baxter's face affectionately. You're a fine man, Baxter. Don't break Logan's heart. Okay, he said cautiously. Where that came from, he could only guess. Good night. Night? Make sure to lock up on the way out. He waited for her to disappear into her bedroom before Baxter turning off the living room lights and locking the door. Logan jogged up. His brow was furrowed in concern. Is everything okay? She's gone to bed. Wasn't up for company, I guess? Well, come over for coffee? Baxter smiled at the invitation. He hadn't had the chance to see the inside of Logan's house yet. The man was always so orderly and neat. His SUV was pristine. His clothing were always fresh and pressed. His lawn was immaculate. Even his garage was neat. No one's garage was neat. The very definition of garage was not neat. With Logan, everything had a place and everything in its place. His living room was more of the same. Baxter stepped in, then moved to the side so Logan could shut the door. I put the book on the kitchen table. Am I putting tea or coffee on? I don't have decaf. Coffee. I don't need decaf. The caffeine doesn't affect me, Baxter said. Lucky. I can't drink anything with caffeine after 6 or I'm up all night. Baxter sat down at the kitchen table and flipped open the recipe book. I saw something I thought was sketchy when I flipped through it earlier. So I want your second opinion. Sure. Logan set up the automatic drip and then dragged a chair next to Baxter. For a brief moment, Baxter's brain froze. He fixated on the scent of Logan's hair. It took all his self-control not to bury his face and inhale like some creeper. What are we looking at? Logan's voice broke through the fog and Baxter straightened. Right? So I'm just going to flip to a page at random, and you tell me what you spot. Holding the book to stand up on its spine, he released it and let the book fall open naturally on a random page. It flopped open, and Baxter didn't even look at it before he shoved the book over in front of Logan. Logan peered closely at the pages. Okay. So I'm looking at a recipe. What am I looking for? Logan peered closely at the pages. Baxter waited patiently. Logan's face furrowed into a frown. I guess I don't see it. Start flipping. Fan the pages and look at the corner. With a shrug, Logan did that. It took a couple of tries before he paused on a recipe. Wait. There it was. While Logan deliberately flipped the pages, Baxter got up and poured himself a mug. He didn't feel like digging for the creamer or the sugar. Turning, he leaned against the counter and watched as Logan flipped the pages faster and faster. She printed these off the internet. Baxter gestured towards the book with his mug. So much for family recipes. Yeah, Logan closed the book. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with getting recipes off the internet. I do it all the time. Do you claim them as your own? He laughed. No, definitely not. But I'm still not sure what your point is. My point is that she has Harvey believing that her recipes were handed down to her. You think this is what has Hild so depressed? I'm willing to bet the bank on it. Baxter strolled to sit next to Logan again. He flipped the book open and thumbed through it. Since they were in alphabetical order, he went to the R's. There it was. Red velvet cake. He scanned the recipe, then sat back feeling rather smug. And it seems she bakes her cakes using red food dye. And? Logan said. I don't follow. Hild's is done through the chemistry of the recipe. Baxter held up a hand. And don't ask for more specifics, because I pretended I understood. Clearly, I didn't. Logan leaned back in the chair. Well, as I see it, you have two problems. Two problems? Wait, I have two problems? He nodded. First is obviously telling Aunt Hild. Her cooking from her grandmother's recipes is a point of pride for her. She was banking on that cake to win Harvey's heart. The second is, dude, Baxter, you stole this book. I didn't steal it, Baxter protested. It was sitting right there. No one in sight. In fact, it could be said I saved it from an uncertain fate. You know how Brussels McScrewed-face likes to throw shit away. Brussels who? That Fraser Carmen guy. Oh, right. The manager of the facility. You have a point. Of course Baxter had a point. The man had almost succeeded in ruining Christmas. Right now he was on Baxter's shit list. So that means you're going to turn this over to Anne Luthrow? Logan asked, holding the book up. No. I hadn't planned on it. Serves her right for upsetting Aunt Hild. Logan looked at Baxter, disapproval clear on his face. Baxter. Don't Baxter me, he said. I want Aunt Hild to see that her competition involves a lying thief to get one up on her. After that, I don't know what I'll do. Obviously, it wasn't a point Logan wanted to argue. So what we need to figure out is how to help Hild get back in Harvey's notice. Why not just tell him that Anne Luthrow is a lying sneak thief? Isn't honesty always the best policy? Yes, but? What possible but can there be? It could hurt Anne. Baxter frowned. And why is that a bad thing? He threw his hands up. Look, I'm not looking to be a bad guy here or anything, but why not just come up off the truth with Harvey and let him make up his own mind? Because this meant so much to your aunt. To do something nice for him. It'd be nice if he could see that it was a gift from her heart to him for a special day. Special day, Baxter scoffed lightly. It's just another day. February 13th, June 5th, October 9th, they're all just days. What makes February 14th so special and unique that it can be ruined? The more Baxter talked, the quieter and more still Logan became, until he wasn't sure that Logan was even breathing. So, you don't think expressing affection is important? Not what I was. And a special day set aside for people to gather the courage to say something to some is, what, bogus? Wasted? Foolish? Uh-oh. Baxter probably just stepped on a landmine, judging by Logan's tone. Logan. Wait. I think? Logan stood abruptly and gathered the book, thrusting it at him. You know, Baxter, I'm tired and it's been a long night. We can talk about this another time. His coffee sat half drunk when Logan took the mug. He poured it in the sink. You can lock the door on the way out. Nope. There was no suspecting anything. He knew he'd stepped in it big time. With Logan's back to him, it was easy to interpret the conversation was over. Sure, I'll see you tomorrow. He slunk to the door like a dog who'd been yelled at. Baxter, Logan said over his shoulder. You need to tell Hild about the book. Because if you don't, I will. Right? And Baxter? Baxter paused again. Take the book with you. I don't want it in my house. Chapter 6. All the next day, Baxter tried to focus on his work. It wasn't easy. The way Logan had totally frozen him out bothered him. Excuse me, a thin voice said, cutting through his thoughts. Baxter shook off the heavy feeling and faced the elderly lady standing next to him in the shop. Yes, ma'am, he said, climbing to his feet. She smiled at him sweetly. Yes. I have a weed eater I need you to look at and see if you can get it running again. Or at least tell me if it can't so I can get a new one. My husband has tried to get this thing to work, and it has just confounded him. Sure. Xander. Baxter spotted his pack brother in the office. Xander shoved one of the chocolates that Ricky dumped into a bowl and trotted out. His cheeks were pooched out as he tried to chew quickly. What's up, Bax? Those are for the customers, Baxter said gruffly with a flap of his rag. Ricky has eaten more of them than me. Help the customer get the weed eater out of her trunk. On it. Xander followed the lady to her Buick. In the shop office, Ricky processed payment from a young couple who had brought in a riding mower the week before. Baxter remembered them because he'd done the work on the engine. Ricky pointed to the bowl, and they both helped themselves with pleased smiles. That bowl had been full when they opened, and Ricky had already refilled it once. With a huff, Baxter went back to work on the chainsaw, focusing on that, and not that Ricky may have had a good idea. You're 1,000 miles away, Clint said. He dragged up a milk crate, turned it over, and sat on it next to Baxter. Everything okay? Baxter set the chainsaw to the side. I guess. Did you and Logan fight? He gave Clint a frown. Where would you get that idea? Talked to Aunt Hild at lunch. Baxter wiped off his hands and pulled his phone out. There were no calls or texts from her. Is everything okay? Sure. She didn't call you because she's mad at you, Clint said. You must have really pissed her off last night. Me? I didn't do anything to piss her off. That one lady stole Aunt Hild's thunder by telling that Harvey guy that Aunt Hild's cake was hers. Clint shrugged. Maybe it was about Logan. I don't know. That's why I'm asking. I got it. Yeah. I think I did. Baxter blew a breath out. You know, people tell us that they want honesty, and then when you give it to them, they get mad. Yeah, buddy. That's where you got your wires crossed. Clint clapped Baxter on the shoulder. There are levels to the degree of honesty that people want. When it comes to affairs of the heart, you got to tread lightly. Baxter blew a raspberry. There's a reason I suck in relationships. You're doing okay. This can be a minor thing if you handle it right. And what does that look like? Clint stood and patted Baxter once more on the shoulder. You just go over, apologize, and then plan something nice for Valentine's Day with Logan. But from the way Aunt Hild sounded, it better be good. That was everyone's first mistake. Expecting Baxter to know exactly how to make it right. Baxter didn't have the focus to get through the day with this fallout hanging over his head. He finally gave up trying to get anything done, washed his hands, and headed over to Aunt Hild's. When he pulled up in her drive, Logan's SUV was parked outside his garage. It was odd that the man would be home so early. Logan was self-employed, but he had an office instead of working out of his home. Although, like Baxter, maybe he could set his own hours. He glanced at the offending book in the passenger's seat of his truck. A thought floated through his brain. He could sneak into the community house and put the book back where he found it. That would solve his problem. Except for the part where it wouldn't. Logan knew he had it, and apparently the man had a conscience. When he entered the house, he heard laughter in the guest bedroom. Bang. I'm so sorry, honey. Was it turned to your left or my left? Logan laughed. You're left. Let's back up and try again. Bang. More laughter. I don't think it's going to fit, Hild. Maybe if we shift this. It sounded like they were in a better mood than Clint let on. He strolled down the hall and paused in the doorway. Need a hand? In the span of a breath, the temperature of the room dropped to freezing. They both looked at him, as if he were the enemy. No, Aunt Hild said icily. We have it, thank you. The side table they were trying to wedge between the bed and the wall was a tight squeeze. From where Baxter stood, he could see it hung against the window jamb. With his size and strength, he could easily pick it up over the jamb and set it into place. They both stood looking at him. It was clear they were waiting for him to leave. If you just lift. We have it, Baxter, thank you, Logan said. With a sigh, Baxter left them to it. Eventually, they'd figure it out. He went to his truck and retrieved the book. Baxter apparently had some apologizing to do. They were both silent when they entered the kitchen. Baxter waited for them as they washed their hands, got something to drink and found other things to do, before finally addressing him as if he were actually there. Aunt Hild pulled out the kitchen chair to sit across from him. Logan made her a cup of tea before he joined her at the table. This would go a lot easier if he understood what he was apologizing for. He figured he'd start at the beginning. With a resigned slide, he pushed the book over to Aunt Hild. Her neutral expression melted away into confusion. What's this? She asked as she carefully picked up the book. I want to make it clear that I didn't steal the book, he said. Baxter, Logan said with an irritated sigh. No, now just hold on. It was obvious that Anne forgot it. Left it behind all right. I just found it. I was going to return it. Baxter shifted his attention to Aunt Hild. But I wanted you to see it first. Well, not first because I wanted Logan to verify what I suspected. Anyway, you're the second person to see it. She lifted each page gently and turned them. It was hard to gauge what she was thinking. That made it much harder for Baxter to gauge how to proceed. Aunt Hild, Anne Luthrow uses recipes she got off the internet. Aunt Hild shook her head and frowned at the pages. I don't, how can you tell? Logan leaned over and pointed to the places where the URL addresses were located. Sometimes you can even tell which site they came from. Better Baking Blog, he said, pointing it out to her before turning the page. Aunt Althea's Cupboard, Sweets and Treats. She adjusted her glasses and peered closer. So what you're saying is that these recipes weren't passed down from her grandmother? Logan turned to the red velvet cake recipe. Not unless her grandmother's name is Adam Stratton. Hild's brows furrowed. Baxter saw her putting the pieces together. She uses red food dye, she said softly. And not the homemade cake you made. So you see? Baxter said, it proves that cake is not actually hers. I mean, people can see when the red is from. It's from the reaction between the cocoa powder, vinegar and buttermilk, she said in surprise. As opposed to the red food coloring. Aunt Hild clapped her hands in delight. This proves it. This proves the cake is mine. Logan draped his arm around her shoulder and gave her a pleased squeeze. That's wonderful, Hild. Now you can march right up to Harvey and show him the proof. Wait, she said, suddenly struck with a thought. No. This doesn't work. Baxter blinked in confusion. Why not? Because this is her recipe book. If I take it to her, she'll accuse me of faking this just to discredit her. How does that work? Baxter closed the book and tapped on the cover. Her name is right there. And what's to stop her from denying it? Aunt Hild said reasonably. That I made this just to make her look bad. Do we know of anyone who saw her with this before you found it? No. And even if it were proven to be hers? She shook her head slowly and pushed the book back across the table to Baxter. No. If it is proven to be hers, it could humiliate her. Isn't that the point? Baxter asked. No, Baxter Lawson, Aunt Hild said sharply. That is not the point. It doesn't matter if she and I don't get along. She's just a lonely old woman who's looking for companionship. If she feels like she's in competition with me, well, that's rather sad, don't you think? Being in competition with me gives her something to do. And I'm just a silly nobody. Logan leaned over to kiss her cheek. You're not a silly nobody. You have people around you who love you, even if they think Valentine's Day is a waste of time. I never said. Logan shot a glare at Baxter to stay quiet. Anyway, if it would make you feel better, Baxter can return it to her. Me? I thought we didn't like Anne Luthrow. Why would I want to help her? I thought I taught you better than that, Baxter, Aunt Hild said with a prim set to her lips. Logan's right. You need to return it to her and apologize for stealing it. But I didn't steal it. Chapter 7. Logan sat in the passenger's side of Baxter's truck, looking from his phone to the mailboxes. Thank you for coming with me, Baxter said. Well, you said you wanted a witness. Here. This is 786 Cypress. Baxter slowed to a stop in front of a neatly kept, single-story house. Like all houses in the subdivision, the lawns and outside of the homes were expected to conform to a certain look in accordance with the HOA. He didn't like all the rules. What tree you could cut down. How to paint your shutters. What kind of mailbox, and what color it needed to be painted. Frankly, he liked his mobile home. It was on a couple of acres, just on the outskirts of Miltonville. And no one told him what he could plant in his front yard, and if a tree offended him, he could bring it down without getting half a dozen permits and approvals. And if he wanted an eye-bleeding pink mobile home, he could have that. If he wanted. Maybe he would paint it, just to prove a point. There was another truck parked in the driveway. Baxter heard the familiar buzz of a gas-powered weed-eater. Harvey appeared around the corner as they approached the front door. Baxter lifted his hand to wave. Harvey waved back. Logan rang the bell, then thrust the recipe book at him. Baxter fumbled with keeping a grip on it when Anne Luthrow answered the door. Baxter stared at her. She stared back. Then her eyes narrowed. You're that wolf boy Hild raised. Why did she have to make wolf boy sound like a disease? Before Baxter could respond, Logan thumped him with his elbow. Good afternoon, Miss Luthrow, Logan interrupted. Logan, she said in a cool tone. What can I do for you? Logan nudged at Baxter again. Baxter almost dropped the recipe book. The motion caught Anne Luthrow's attention, and her eyes widened in surprise. She looked outside to see where Harvey was. He was down by the mailbox. She snatched it from Baxter and hugged it close. Where did you get this? She hissed. Well, long story, Baxter said. During bingo, I was helping Ralph handle the garbage. Behind us, the weed-eater stopped. And I was passing an empty room when I saw it sitting there. So you stole it? She said in a loud voice. What? No. I didn't steal it. Baxter wished everyone would stop saying that. I found it, and was worried that Ralph might accidentally think it was trash. You're saying the recipes that were passed down for generations in my family are trash? What? No. Baxter sighed heavily. From out of the corner of his eye, he saw Harvey standing there, watching their exchange. I am saying, I was holding on to it so that I could return it. Is everything okay, Anne? Harvey asked. Abruptly, as if she were two different people, she started to sob. Hild sent her son to steal my recipe book. No doubt to get her greedy hands on my recipes. Harvey clucked his tongue. Now, son, you know that a lady likes to keep some things secret. Especially if she prides herself on such fine food like Anne does here. No, Harvey, Logan interjected smoothly, that's not what happened. Then how do you explain this? Anne thrust the book out dramatically. I just returned that to you, Baxter said. After you stole it. Miss Luthrow, if you'll let him explain, Logan began. She cut him off abruptly. I don't need to hear from some filthy wolf-diseased person, or the pathetic woman who couldn't have children of her own, and had to settle for the dregs society could offer. Logan's eyebrows lifted in shock. Anne, I'm sure he can't control what he is. Their affliction is a virus, and people get it under extreme circumstances, not due to any fault of their own, Harvey offered cautiously. He's returned the book now, so why don't we go inside? There's nothing worth stealing anyway, Baxter said. Once someone played the lichen card, the conversation had already deteriorated beyond pleasantries. Baxter, Logan whispered harshly. No, Baxter said mulishly. It's fine what she thinks of me, but I won't have her trash talk Aunt Hild like that. You got a lot of nerve, lady, to accuse her of stealing a book filled with recipes copied from the internet. You see, Harvey? You see? That's the type of person Hild Brentworth traffics with. I knew it was a mistake to approve her application. Now I'm accused of being a fraud. Frankly, Logan, I'm disappointed you've chosen to align with such trash. Baxter's temper was getting away from him. Heat flooded his face, and he felt his calm starting to slip. It was one thing to call him names. It was a completely different other to do so on Aunt Hild and Logan. That snapped the last of his resolve to stay civil. And you're a liar while I'm at it, he said. Making Harvey think that cake was from you when it was Aunt Hild who made it was low. Anne covered her mouth, choking on a gasp. She clutched her book closer. All right, son, Harvey said. He sat the weed eater down and stepped between Baxter and Anne. I think it's time for you to go. With a growl, Baxter whirled on his heels and stalked back to the truck. Logan could follow or not. He didn't care. By the time he crawled behind the wheel, Logan was sliding in the passenger's side. Well, that could have gone better. He had to take several steady breaths. I don't care what they call me, all right. She didn't say anything me or my pack brothers hadn't heard before. But she was trashing Aunt Hild and you. Logan reached over to take Baxter's hand. I know. I say it could have gone better, but that's not on you. He paused before he chuckled. Well, some of it is. You were saying some pretty hard things to her, and it wasn't helping the situation. Baxter made a sour face. He wasn't going to give that a response. He used his left hand to awkwardly start his truck because he didn't want to turn loose of Logan's hand. He was able to get the truck into gear and make a U-turn there in front of Anne Luthrow's house before heading back to his aunt's. Aunt Hild met them at the door when he drove up. She looked very cross. Her arms crossed over her chest, one finger tapping lightly. Now that he was away from that hateful woman, Baxter felt a tad sheepish that she had gotten under his skin. Not that he didn't feel fully justified with everything he said, of course. Something tells me you heard, Baxter said. Come inside, boys. Baxter offered Logan a sheepish smile before following her inside. Logan was close on his heels. She met them in the kitchen. So things got a little heated, I hear. Logan's face was priceless. He looked from Baxter to Aunt Hild. How did you? Marjorie Fullman lives across the street from Anne. She said she could hear Anne and Baxter from her living room. Logan was flummoxed and Baxter just laughed dryly. She wasn't outside. Apparently, she didn't need to be. Want to tell me what happened? Baxter sighed heavily and sat down. Lost my temper. I gathered that. Anything else? Hild. She held up a hand to silence Logan, her attention still fixed on Baxter. How many times had he sat at her kitchen table as she tried to talk him through handling his emotions when he was younger? It didn't feel like anything had changed in all that time. Lost my temper, he repeated. He would not repeat the hateful thing that woman said about Aunt Hild. And he was not going to apologize for doing it, either. I didn't mean to make things harder on you. Baxter could admit to that. Well, she said with a soft sigh. I suppose there's nothing to be done for it now. I had invited Harvey over for a Valentine's Day lunch, but he just called to cancel before you showed up. Baxter's head snapped up. He canceled over what happened? Aunt Hild, that's not right. It is what it is, honey. But it's okay. During their talk, Logan sat in the chair next to him. He was watching Baxter intently. To the point it was uncomfortable. I still don't get what the big deal about the day is, anyway. It's just another day. Logan's head dropped to the table with a heavy thud. Well, I think you've done just about all you can today, Baxter. Why don't you head home? I'll talk to you tomorrow. Pushing up from the table, he kissed Aunt Hild's cheek. As he passed by Logan, he settled a hand on the man's shoulder. He was still face down on the tabletop. If he was going to keep pissing people off, Baxter didn't want to stick around for fear he'd leave his few close attachments in ashes. Sometimes it was best to just stop talking. Chapter 8. Baxter. He turned to the sound of his name. Logan trotted out of Aunt Hild's house and met him at his truck. Logan punched him in the chest. What is it with you and your inability to be nice? What? I was being nice. When was I not nice? All he got was Logan flopping his arms about. Could you be a little more specific? I get that Anne Luthrow pushed your buttons. Nothing you said was untrue. You just picked the worst way to say it. Plus, you did it in front of Harvey, which we now found out, and he motioned back towards Aunt Hild's house. Wrecked her Valentine's Day plans. Why am I getting the blame for this? That hateful woman started all this. And you should be above it. The hell you preach. Maybe I don't want to be above it. Maybe I'm tired of being above it. Logan crossed his arms and looked at Baxter in disapproval. I don't believe that. Well, Baxter was losing steam in his own righteous anger. He felt justified in the way he handled Anne Luthrow, just as he could admit that maybe he should have done it better. But it was done, and he was still getting beat up about it. All he'd done was defend the woman who took him in when no one else would. Look, Baxter. I get your complete and utter disdain for Valentine's Day, okay? It's not a celebration that everyone gets behind. But it was important for Hild. What you've done is give who she considers her rival something to use against her, and embarrass her in front of a man she obviously cares about. Making a red velvet cake for someone doesn't exactly equate to love, Baxter said testily. Logan's head fell back, and he let out a frustrated groan. After several attempts to talk, only to have the words lost in a frustrated attempt to say something, he started towards his house. Good night, Baxter. Baxter watched him leave. He thought maybe he should try to talk this through. To Logan. To Aunt Hild. His instincts told him it wasn't a good time. Frustration, anger, guilt swirled around in a sad mixture that sat in his gut and churned. He climbed in his truck and headed for home. You know, Bax, Clint said as he brought 2 beers from Baxter's fridge. He handed one off to Baxter before flopping into the lawn chair next to him. They both stared at the fire Baxter had built in the fire pit in his backyard. I think the romance fairy skipped you when she was passing out romantic notions or something. Baxter snorted and took a long drink off his beer. I just don't understand why everyone's so big on Valentine's Day. It's never done anything for me. That's because you're too busy growling at guys who might take an interest in you and scaring them off. Clint playfully pushed at Baxter's shoulder. You need to pull your head out of your ass and think about someone else for once. What the? Baxter sighed. I do think about other people. I go to Aunt Hild's every day to check on her. I am there every Sunday for dinner. Even when the rest of you jerks are off getting laid, I'm the one there. Hey, don't blame us for your lack of a social life. That's your choice, man. What I'm saying is that it's a bit unfair to tell me I'm selfish when I look after her in every way I can. Do you do it out of guilt and obligation, Baxter? Clint asked, his tone lost its playfulness. You do it because you feel you owe it to Aunt Hild to look after her? Baxter frowned. I do it for more than that. But what the hell is wrong with feeling like I owe her my life? That we all do. And you know that as well as I do. If it weren't for her, who knows how we would have turned out. The system had never been kind to the lichen infected. Especially the children. Clint dropped his head and stared up at the starry sky. It was just after sunset, and the first of the stars were coming out. With the sun sinking down below the horizon, the temperature had dropped a few degrees. Baxter was glad he built a fire to help fight off the chill. Maybe for once, step out of your own skin and ask what Aunt Hild's needs and desires are. Are you telling me that buying her a ridiculous bare and oversized card is somehow going to miraculously convince her that I love her? Baxter scoffed at the idea. That she doesn't already know it, with all the times I say it on every other day of the year? That doing it on this one specific day is going to give it more meaning? I think people need to give up this notion of waiting for one day in a year to show someone you love them and appreciate them. Because it holds importance and significance. Why don't they show that love and appreciation without being guilted into it by Madison Avenue? That's what's wrong in the world. No one tells anyone how they feel anymore. He glanced over to see Clint staring with his mouth open. What? Have you told Logan how you feel? Baxter's face heated. What do you mean by that? Oh, give me a break. You know exactly what I mean. We're taking it slow. Baxter didn't like how defensive he sounded. It was too late now. And clearly Clint caught it, judging by the way his eyebrows lifted. Don't look at me like that. I'm just waiting to hear more of your astounding self-denial. It's like a bingo card. Baxter groaned. If he never heard about bingo again, it would still be too soon. Shut up. Baxter. Stop being a dingus. Valentine's Day isn't just about you, idiot. There is another person involved, and while you may find it a waste of time, the other person, who in this case are Aunt Hild and Logan, may find it especially romantic or important to them. So what are you suggesting? Baxter deflated. Obviously, Clint wasn't going to let this go. If you're going to be critical, then pony up some ideas of what I can do to make this right. It's not hard, man. Sincere apologies go a long way. It won't kill you to say you're sorry. Sorry about what? No wrong answer, Clint said with a slow shake of his head. What you say is, I'm sorry that I embarrassed you and messed up your plans for Valentine's Day, and I want to make it up to you by cooking you a delicious dinner. That can work for Aunt Hild and Logan. Although I'd suggest patching things up with Aunt Hild first. And for Logan? I mean, since you seem so invested in my love life and all. Get him in on the dinner action. Working together, seeing you being all domesticated to do something nice for Aunt Hild will go a long way. Cries Baxter. This is Relationship 101. Fine. Baxter drained his beer and collected all the empties they'd accumulated since Clint got there. But you have to help me put together a dinner plan that I can make. Clint rubbed his hands together in glee. Now we're talking my language. I can pull something together that will charm Aunt Hild's socks off. Bring a pen and pad when you come back out, son. You're about to learn from the relationship master. Baxter groused as he rinsed the bottles before leaving them upside down to dry. Why does this shit have to be so complicated? Because it's the human heart, dude. As if that explained anything to Baxter. Chapter 9. Baxter stood in the middle of Aunt Hild's kitchen, the sense of overwhelm pressing down firmly on his confidence. When he and Clint got the ingredients for the meal, Clint assured him he could handle this simple meal of baked chicken with herb potatoes, snapped green beans, and a Caesar salad. It seemed rather basic, but it was the best he could do. Baxter wasn't a cook. Now he wished he'd been the one to keep Aunt Hild busy and let Clint do the cooking. The flaw with that plan was that she was still miffed at Baxter. Besides, he needed to do this. He could do this. All he had to do was follow the instructions. Right? He wasn't off to a very good start. The moment chicken juice spilled out of the wrapper, dripped down his arm and puddled on the kitchen floor, Baxter began to have serious doubts. "Remove the chicken parts and set aside," he read from the recipe. Baxter stared at the chicken. Where were the parts he was supposed to remove? They weren't in the wrapper. He searched the grocery bags. Did they get the chicken parts? Were they needed? A quick search on the internet answered that question. He picked up the chicken and looked in one end. There was something just wrong about looking in the chicken hole. And now he had to stick his hand in there? How would he know if he got all the parts? What parts would there be, and what parts would they leave out? He was never going to get this done in time. It was time to bite the bullet and call in the big guns to help. Leaving it on the counter, Baxter washed his hands. They had just been in a chicken carcass after all, and he texted Logan. "Help, please?" Never had Baxter stared so hard at a phone, waiting for Logan to reply. There was no message, but it rang. Logan's number came up on caller ID. "Hey," Baxter said. Got a minute?" The coolness of the silence came through loud and clear on the phone. "I suppose. What's up?" "I have chicken juice all over me." The silence was a lot longer the second time. "Baxter," Logan finally said, "what are you doing?" "Trying to fix Aunt Hild a chicken dinner for Valentine's Day. They made me put my hand in the chicken. Consent is a real thing, you know." "Who made you, never mind," Logan said on a soft sigh. "Don't do anything. I'll be right over." Logan didn't make Baxter wait long. Within minutes, he knocked on the door before walking in. "Baxter?" "Kitchen," Baxter called out. "I figured out how to peel the potatoes." "That's a start." Logan paused at the kitchen door. "What are you doing again?" "I decided that since I messed up Aunt Hild's Valentine's Day with Harvey, the least I could do was make her a special dinner. I'm really not very good at this. There's a reason why they don't let me in the kitchen." Logan rummaged around in the bags, pulling things out before putting them back. He rubbed at his eyes and sighed. "Okay. Stop what you're doing. Put everything back in your bags and come with me." Logan to the rescue. Once they resituated in Logan's kitchen, he took over making the meal to Baxter's relief. "I really appreciate this," Baxter said, hovering off to the side. "Clint helped me find something that would be easy to fix, but after the chicken peed on me." That broke the frostiness, and Logan chuckled. "It wasn't pee. It looked like pee. Anyway, it hit me kind of sudden that I wasn't ready for something this advanced." "Baked chicken," Logan said. "I guess it can be considered advanced. But we can whip something up tasty that she'll appreciate." "Can I do something?" "I don't want you to do it all. It's not fair. Actually, you can be my runner. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right." Logan started pulling down spices from his cabinet, sorting through them. "You're going to start a list of things I need you to get from the store. It's not going to be something complicated like dry milk, is it?" He paused before giving Baxter a perplexed look. "I'm sure that makes sense. I mean, be specific if it's a special item thing." "Gotcha. This won't be complicated at all. Pen and pad are by the phone." Now that Baxter was armed with a list, he was ready to brave the grocery store to get the items. The shelves that had been filled with Valentine's Day stuff a day ago was almost bare now. The large teddy bear that Ricky played with sat in the bin, tilted limply to one side and all by itself. No other stuffed animal friends to keep it company. Baxter stared at it. The bear stared back. It seemed sad sitting there all on its own, the last stuffed plushie. All of its friends were gone. They had been picked before the teddy bear. Unwanted. Baxter could identify. "You're ridiculous," he said. "What would he do with you?" The bear looked back, the challenge in its beady black eyes. The answer seemed obvious, and he wanted to dismiss it as a colossal waste of money, but Clint's words rang in his ear. "It's not about me," Baxter said. And he finally understood. The teddy bear slumped further down in the bin. It seemed to agree with him. This shopping trip had been so much easier this time. Logan had been very specific in what he wanted, or the items had been very simple to get. Lemon. How did you screw up getting a lemon? It wasn't like there was a choice between dry or evaporated. He loaded the bags into his truck and glanced at the time. He had 2 more stops to make before heading back. Baxter. He turned to face who called out for him. Harvey gave him a wave and crossed the parking lot toward him. "Hey Harvey," Baxter said. He headed for where the carts were stored when Harvey trotted to catch up. "I'll take that, I'm headed in." "Thanks." Baxter let the other man take control of the cart. He almost walked off before turning around to face Harvey. "This is kind of awkward. I think I owe you an apology for how I behaved the other day. I was rude and disrespectful to Anne Luthrow, and I shouldn't have continued on in the face of her distress, and I should have stepped back when you warned me to. I'm sorry." Harvey scratched the back of his head. He gave Baxter a chagrined look. "About that. We need to talk. I've been trying to reach your aunt all afternoon." "Okay. I think we have everything. Did you get her dining room situated?" "Everything's ready. Clint texted to say they're on their way home. We have about half an hour before they get here." "Where did he take her?" "To distribute the Valentine's cards to the kids at the hospital." Logan smiled. "That's so sweet. He really is dedicated to good works for the kids." "Don't let him fool you. He started doing it just to get laid. But he continues to do it because it's sweet and compassionate and kind." Baxter made a sour face. "I guess." Logan punched him in the arm. "And Harvey is okay with your plan?" Baxter nodded. "He's getting ready and should be here in time." They loaded all the food into a box to make it easy to transport back over to Aunt Hild's. Logan picked up the box and headed into the living room. He paused in front of the gigantic teddy bear sitting in the chair. Wedged in its lap was an equally enormous sparkly red card with "Be Mine" emblazoned in multicolored sparkles and glitter across the front of it. "Baxter." Baxter paused next to Logan. The look on Logan's face was priceless. "Happy Valentine's Day," Baxter said softly. Logan chuckled and nudged Baxter with his elbow. "You're a nut." "I'm a selfish dingus. But I do eventually get it. Just takes me longer than most." "Apparently so." Logan leaned into Baxter and kissed his cheek. "Thank you." Baxter's face heated in embarrassment. "We need to go." Maybe Clint was on to something. This was about the other person. It felt pretty neat. "They're back," Logan called from his station by the window. He joined Baxter in the kitchen. "And did you call Harvey?" Logan waggled his phone. "I did. He said he was on his way over now." Baxter handed Logan the gravy bowl and the wine glasses. "Here, get these on the table. Did you put the champagne on ice?" "I did," Logan said. He set the gravy at the center of the table and glanced at his reflection in the china cabinet's glass doors, patting his hair down for the 100th time. "Are you sure I look like a waiter?" "Have you ever waited tables before?" Baxter asked as he put the rolls into the oven and set the timer. He might not be much of a cook, but he could do heat and serve rolls like a champion. "Yeah, but at a fern bar where we were given uniform shirts." "I want this to look a little classed up," Logan said as he smoothed his hand down his white shirt. "Black slacks, white shirt with tie and dress shoes. You look fine." Baxter handed the oven mitt and timer off to Logan. "The rolls will come out in 4 minutes. Don't forget them. I have to go change now." "What are you going to do?" Logan asked as Baxter headed for the hall. "Something I'll need your help with just as soon as Harvey gets here." "This ought to be good," Logan murmured. Baxter just flashed him a smile and disappeared. As Baxter laid out the things he'd need, he heard the front door open and shut. There was soft conversation, and Aunt Hild giggled ever so often. Logan was really pouring on the outrageous French accent, as he seated her at the table and offered to pour her the champagne. "Baxter, honey?" Aunt Hild called out. "Are you coming to eat with me? There are 2 place settings here." "No, ma'am," he said, stripping off his clothes. The doorbell rang again. There was Harvey. Right on time. Time for the last phase of his plan for the evening. Chapter 10. Logan appeared after a few minutes. He stopped in the doorway of the guest room. A look of surprise flew across his face. It softened immediately to one of affection. Baxter sat in the middle of the bed in full wolf form. Next to him were a pair of white fuzzy cupid wings and a plastic recorder. Logan covered his mouth when he started laughing. He tried very hard to stay quiet. The effort was great enough that tears formed and streamed down his cheeks. After wheezing a few times, Logan was able to get it under control. He wiped at his eyes and stepped into the room. "You are an amazing man, Baxter Lawson." That was high praise coming from Logan. Baxter's heart puffed up in pride. It was a little tricky to get the wings to stay in place. In the end, Logan had to use one of his socks to keep the harness tight enough that the wings didn't flop around on his back. Baxter looked at Logan's bare foot. Then up to Logan. "Oh, don't worry about it. I think the slacks are long enough to cover up that I don't have a sock on." He would have to take Logan's word for it, because there was little room to improvise further. Baxter jumped off the bed and nosed at the recorder before he looked at Logan again. "How exactly is that going to work?" Logan asked. He opened his mouth. "Seriously?" It wasn't like Baxter could argue the point. Logan would just have to trust him. "You are a very strange man." Logan left the room to get dinner started. He waited until he heard the cork pop on the champagne before walking down the hall. With soft puffs of his breath, Baxter blew into the recorder. The soft musical sound was a mournful note that faded off and fell a little flat as he reached the end of his breath. But he inhaled and blew again. All conversation had stopped, and they all watched his approach. Harvey looked appropriately conflicted. But he wasn't racing out the door, so that was a bonus. Aunt Hild sat at the table, her chest heaving in a silent laugh. She had her mouth covered until she could no longer control the sound, rocking back to hoot loudly. Harvey took his cues from Logan and Aunt Hild that things were fine. Baxter sat primly in the corner, his white feathery wings sliding sideways across his back as he played the same somber note over and over. Okay, honey," Aunt Hild said. She stood from the table and took the recorder from Baxter's mouth. "That's quite enough serenading from Cupid for one night. If I have to hear much more, I'll pull a muscle from laughing." She smoothed her hand over his head and tugged at his ears. Leaning in, she whispered, "Thank you. This is the best Valentine's Day gift anyone could have gotten for me." As Logan cleared the table, Hild walked Harvey out to his car to say goodnight. Baxter scratched at the wings and went into the kitchen to knock his head against Logan's thigh. "What can I do for you, Baxter?" he asked, looking down. Baxter shook hard. The wings flopped around on his back, but they didn't dislodge. Logan's knot was secure. "I don't know." He propped his hands on his hips. "I think they're rather cute. Cute and fuzzy. They're perfect for you, actually." Baxter sighed. "Oh, fine." Logan untied the knot and pulled the wings from his body. "Hurry up and get dressed. I'm not doing the dishes by myself." By the time Baxter was dressed, Hild had come back in, humming happily. "How was your dinner?" Baxter asked. "It was wonderful," she said with a spin. "A delightful evening that I couldn't have guessed was coming. You owe Clint a huge favor for keeping this a secret. I didn't suspect anything." Baxter frowned, his cheeks and ears burning. "So, have you and Harvey worked things out?" "We have. And I suppose I owe you a thank you and an apology. After that fracas at Ann Luthrow's house, she carried on quite shamelessly, by the way, reveling in Harvey's attention. As she acted so dramatically wounded, something fell out of her recipe book. Apparently, when she took the card, she didn't throw it away. She must have hastily stuck it in her book. Aunt Hild sat back down at the table to watch as Baxter and Logan cleaned the kitchen. When he picked it up, he saw it was for him, read it, and that's when he realized what had happened. Logan clapped his hands on her shoulders and bent to give her a kiss on the cheek. "Hild, that's wonderful. I mean, not for Anne Luthrow, though. It's actually rather sad." Aunt Hild nodded slowly. "She's just a lonely woman. I was thinking about taking her some lemon bars in a few days and visit with her. Find a way to fix this rift between us." "That's very generous of you," Logan said. Baxter rinsed the dishes and put them in the dishwasher. "It is. I wouldn't do it. You're just a grumpy old wolf." Logan hip-checked Baxter playfully. "Well, if you two can handle things here, I'm going to go to bed. It's been an eventful day. I don't know how Clint keeps up with the kids. They ran me ragged," Aunt Hild said. She slowly rose to her feet and carefully stretched before giving Logan and Baxter goodnight kisses. "Logan, take the leftovers home with you. I don't think I'll have room in my refrigerator to store them. Make sure to lock up when you're done, Baxter." "Night, Hild," Logan said. "Happy Valentine's Day, Aunt Hild." She gave them both an exhausted, grateful smile and disappeared down the hall. Logan waited until the door shut before he started stacking his dishes up. "Let's get these back to my place to divide up the leftovers. I think there's enough for both our lunches tomorrow." "Okay." They put the covered dishes in the small box they used to port them from Logan's place, and he started across the hard. Baxter locked up the house before following Logan to his house. He opened the door for Logan and helped him get the food to the kitchen. "There's not much to do here," Logan said. "I'm half tempted to leave it until morning." "Let's get it done. Then the rest of the night is ours, and that's not hanging over our head." Baxter washed and Logan rinsed the last of the dinner dishes. "Thank you, Logan," Baxter said as he handed Logan the final pan. "For what?" "For helping me pull that off. I couldn't have done it without you." "I'm glad things worked out," he said. "None of it would have worked out if you hadn't been there to rescue my ignorant butt from an impending disaster." Baxter rinsed the sink. He squeezed the sponge out and put it in the holder. It was the same kind of plastic daisy-decorated holder that Aunt Hild had beside her sink. Baxter stared at it for a moment. "You two shop at the same place." Logan glanced over where Baxter pointed out what he referred to. He laughed softly. "She got it for me when she was at the dollar store. Only cost $1. She never gets me anything like that." "Maybe because you never use your kitchen?" Baxter snickered. "Probably. I do use the dishwasher. Although sometimes I lose track if the dishes are dirty or clean, and end up washing them again just to be sure." Logan slid his hand into Baxter's and pulled him to the living room. "Come on, Mr. Lawson. You deserve the rest of the night off. Come sit down." "I thought you wanted to finish that bottle of champagne," Baxter protested, but he still followed as Logan led him to the couch. "It'll keep." They both settled on the couch, Logan sitting pressed up against him. Baxter lifted his arm to drape over Logan's shoulders. It was cozy sitting there with Logan. The house was quiet, and Logan's body was warm. After all the tension of the past days, it was nice to just sit and be still with Logan. Baxter didn't require conversation. He was content to simply be with Logan. Logan swiped through the pictures of the evening. Harvey and Aunt Hild softly light by the candle lights as they held hands. The chintzy Valentine's Day hearts strung all over the dining room. And Baxter, looking utterly ridiculous as a wolf with angel wings. Baxter grabbed the phone and gave it a toss to the other end of the couch, just out of reach. Before Logan could reach for it, he pulled the man back to sit next to him. "Enough of that. That was my favorite image, Baxter. When you're in your wolf form, it takes away some of your rough edges. If you use cute or fuzzy in a sentence, I will go home," Baxter said gruffly. Clearly, Logan wasn't taking the threat seriously. He was too smart for his own good. Baxter slumped on the couch and let his head fall back. I'm glad that's over. I thought for sure it would end in disaster. I think you did just fine. You did just fine. It was all on you. I would have botched that whole thing all up if you hadn't stepped in. It was a solid menu plan. It just needed a little sprucing here and there. Well, Baxter let out a long exhale. His belt was starting to feel a little snug. Your sprucing was just the perfect thing. If it weren't so late, it'd be time for a nap, Logan said. He kicked off his shoes and pulled his feet on the couch so he could lean heavily into Baxter. Logan's solid weight as it pressed against Baxter warmed him all over. Shifting to the side so Logan could lean comfortably ended, with Baxter's arm draped across Logan's chest. At this point, Baxter didn't want to move. If Logan wanted to lean against him for the rest of the night, he was okay with being a human pillow. In the other chair, the teddy bear looked back at him. Even for an inanimate object, Baxter sensed a certain degree of smugness in its expression. Fine, he murmured softly, giving the bear a frown. You were right. I was wrong. Logan inhaled sharply and scrubbed his eyes. What? Nothing. Were you asleep? Not quite, but I was close. He twisted so he could sit up, then he rolled to his feet. I hate to be such a killjoy, but I should probably get to bed. Baxter stood with him. I understand. I need to get back to the house. What is it about this holiday? No day off. For something so important, you'd think that would have been designed in. Their hands bumped gently, and Logan looked down before he threaded their fingers together. You know, you don't have to go. Baxter's breath caught in his chest. He turned to face Logan, releasing his hand before draping his arm around Logan's shoulders. I figured. But it seemed bad form to assume. Logan returned the embrace. His body warmth seeped through Baxter's clothing. I mean, my couch is very comfortable. Or so I'm told. Oh ha ha, Baxter said in a playful flat voice. You're a tease. I don't mean to be. You're a liar, Logan Price. Logan tipped onto his toes and pressed his mouth against Baxter's in a chaste kiss. And you're a cute and fuzzy wolf, Baxter Lawson. No, I'm your Valentine. Logan pressed his ear to Baxter's chest, his arms wrapped tightly around Baxter's waist. He hummed out a sigh of contentment. That you are, Baxter. That you are. Epilogue. If I eat one more chocolate thing, I'm going to herk. Ricky looked mournfully at the bowl of chocolate candy on Baxter's shop desk. I told you that you got too much, Clint said, trying not to laugh. He was failing. Baxter growled at them. Don't you have something to do to keep yourselves busy? With Jared still in Vegas, we are short a man and Xander can't do everything himself out there. Clint held his hands up. Fine, fine. Just put Ricky outside or something. He looks like he's about to yak all over the place, and I'm not cleaning it up. No, he's not, Baxter said. Are you, Ricky? No. Ricky burped, his eye growing wide before he raced out of the office and around to the row of bushes that lined the side of the building. That's just gross. Clint watched as Ricky barfed up all the chocolate he'd eaten that morning. Why are you still in here? Touchy touchy. I need help getting a lawnmower into the shop. Since Ricky is tossing his candy into the bushes, I could use another set of hands. Baxter followed Clint out to push the lawnmower from the lot into one of the bays. So how did the rest of the night go for Aunt Hild? Harvey and Aunt Hild worked things out. Apparently, Harvey caught Ann Luthrow in her lie. That's good. I'm glad everything is back to normal. Pretty much. I wanted to ask you about something. You got a minute? I guess. I am helping you push this thing. Not like I'm going anywhere. Right, so see, I was talking with Xander this morning, and he told me the craziest thing. Clint disengaged the hydraulics so the mower could be pushed easily. He said he saw you driving through Miltonville yesterday evening with a giant teddy bear in the passenger's seat. Baxter glared at Clint. Logan liked the teddy bear. Hey, I'm not judgy or anything. You looked like you were going to be all judgy. No, judgy would be if you named the bear. Baxter remained quiet. Mortimer. Clint stopped pushing, blinking at Baxter before he burst out laughing. Oh my shitballs. Seriously? He's a Mortimer, okay? Clint clapped him on the back. The things we do for love. Baxter wouldn't argue with that. Baxter and Logan's story continues in The Wolf Who Saved Easter. Don't miss out on sneak peeks, exciting news, and more. Sign up for Chloe Zane's newsletter to stay up to date on her upcoming books.